Welcome back. Another week. Big 12 Soccer Show. Bigger than 12. I'm Danny Catula. This is your home for everything Big 12 women's soccer. Listen, playoffs are well underway. Wednesday, big day. Saturday, just as big. Second round, the quarterfinals have 4 more games all on that single Saturday. A lot of excitement to look forward to, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Those first 4 games are going to recap them, set you up for what's coming next in the show. First off, it stands out. Every single match decided by 1 goal. None required overtime, interestingly enough. We did have 2 go chalk, 2 go to the higher seed. Colorado with the very slight upset, 9-8 over Utah. Second game of the day, 2-1. Baylor by the same scoreline beat Arizona, the 10 over the 7. Kansas in the late game won 2-1. They are one of the closer by teams here in Kansas City, maybe an hour out. Arizona State at a much longer distance. It was not a worthwhile trip in terms of longevity. They're headed back home, and more than likely they will not find themselves in the NCAA tournament. Early game, Oklahoma State and Cincinnati both taking longer trips. OK State gets a 3-2 victory. Crazy stuff. We'll get to that more later. But that 3-2 win, the only one that didn't finish 2-1, and one of 2 that went the way that seeding would have made you expect it to. So now we've got 5 Oklahoma State, we've got 9 Colorado, 10 Baylor, and 6 Kansas. Those 4 advance to the quarterfinals against those top 4 teams who had to bye: Texas, Tech, TCU, West Virginia, and BYU, who snuck in. That's how things look. Let's set you up with the tactical analysis for our highlight game. OSU and Cincinnati. Whew, that was a tight one. Show you how it happened. All right, here we go, friends. Getting tactical. Tactical analysis for this week. Listen, we're between what we had in the first round and what's coming in the second round. A lot of exciting things happening for me. What easily stands out among some really compelling storylines: what on earth happened in the morning game on Wednesday? Cincinnati got out to a very surprising 2-0 lead. They held it through 75 minutes, and Oklahoma State was able to turn themselves into cardiac cowgirls and find their way all the way back. They win it 3-2 in regulation time. Crazy stuff. How did it go down? That's the question I think everybody has. First of all, what caused OSU to implode so much in that first majority of the match and well into the second half? And then the follow-up question is, how did Cincinnati give it away? Well, you got to give Oklahoma State credit, I think, on both counts, but especially the end where they found the turnaround. And to be fair, it did feel like it was coming. Aside from soccer sometimes being a game where things just don't go how the storyline and the scoreline look like it's supposed to, that happens. But putting that aside, there are some explanations tactically as to why those first 75 minutes went Cincinnati's way so decidedly. Cincinnati did something that not a whole lot of other teams at Cincinnati's level have done to them this year. They took a page out of TCU and Texas Tech and Colorado's book. Some of the better teams in the West Virginia did this too. Oklahoma State in general beat the teams below them and did not beat the teams above them. They were well and truly a 4th, 5th place team pretty much all year long. They started out pretty slowly, turned out because their early season schedule is very difficult. Here's why. I want to show you exactly what some of the better teams in the league did to OSU. And Colorado suffered from this, and we talked about it last week. Oklahoma State, they press a lot when they want to at times, but they allow their pressing to do the work for them. And what I mean by that is they are not going to have possession all the time. They're not going to work the ball around between these players and just try to suffocate you with the ball. They would rather coax you into a mistake on the ball yourself. Now, that works great for OSU because this is a head coach in Colin Carmichael and a ball club as a whole that is really getting more out of the sum of their parts than they should be. This is a team that's overperforming against their level of quality player by player, right? Looking across this lineup, looking at the depth, looking at all 11 starting positions, good players across the board. Excret Binel is probably a genuine star. Outside of her, it's just kind of role players coming together and making a really good team. Kind of reminds you, in a basketball example, of the nearby Oklahoma City Thunder, something like that. Or maybe an old school kind of Spurs dynasty sort of thing. So that's kind of what we're looking at. And so they use that to their advantage and say, all right, we are going to soak up pressure. We're going to play with the ball when we're allowed to play with it, but we are going to coax somebody else into a mistake and pounce on it as a unit, play good football, and just, as mistake free as possible, play our way into wins just by being smarter and a little bit of a class above the rest of the league. And that's for the most part what they've done against the best teams in the league, though. They can't do it. Why? Because they make fewer mistakes. So there's fewer for OSU to capitalize on. They get behind early in a game. All of a sudden, they're disoriented. They don't really know how to respond because they're not built to try and come from behind. They're not built to score a lot of goals and really just take the game to an opponent. That's not how they're designed to run. So what Cincinnati does very wisely is they say, well, we don't really want the ball because we know that's not when we play at our best. Again, this is the 12th seed, barely snuck in, haven't won a lot of contests. When they have been good, it's not because they've tried to control the run of play, because quite frankly, they know, and most of the league knows, that's not really what they do best. They're going to go long, all day long. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But for their perspective, it works every single time. Because whether you find this player on the wing or down the middle, they use the middle a lot too. Whether or not you find that player in that advanced area over here, even if OSU double teams that they win it back, well, look where they are. They're in their own half, and they have to try and create something against the Cincinnati team that was doing this on purpose, right? So they're going to play it long, but they're going to keep their back line and their midfield intact because they know that what OSU really wants to do is catch them in a mistake, right? Too many players go forward. They leave a hole open. Let's say it's over here. Pineda can go through it. Lexi Leak, Gracie Binboydle, attackers like that. Well, can't do that if Cincinnati was thinking a move ahead and playing a chess game when OSU's playing checkers, and that's what they did in the first 60, 70 minutes, at least the first half. OSU started to kind of calm themselves down and figure it out, but it almost felt like it was too late. So for the vast majority of the match, that's what's happened. Now, set everybody back up again, and we'll take you to what changed in the final 15 minutes. And part of this isn't tactical, it's just, a team buckles down, and from the Cowgirls' perspective, they say, listen, this can't be the end of our regular season. We got to make sure that we've got a tournament berth. We've got to make sure we can make a run. They still have something to prove after the 2-0 loss that they don't feel like they deserved at home against TCU in the regular season opener, or closer, I should say, last week. So here's what they're going to do. They are going to make calculated risks. And what I mean by that is, again, they're not a risk-taking team, but they are going to use what they really have is two forwards, two strikers who are almost wingers, and they're playing sort of a false nine system. So they're going to use this positional number 9. Can be Pineda sometimes, can be Lee. Off the bench, you can see Perosi play a role like this. But they're just going to pull the strings, but they're going to actually almost become a holding midfielder and allow these midfielders, Chloe Wright maybe, it could be Reagan off the bench, they're going to use these players to go forward because they can, but they're going to take this calculated risk that they've got a player here on the back line, and they're going to move Chloe Joseph, players like that forward, and this is what they're going to do. So they're going to play through this number 9, and now all of a sudden they're going to try and pick Cincinnati apart. Again, Cincinnati's been working really hard, very deliberately. They're tired, right? Emotionally, mentally, more than physically. What does that mean? They can finally start to exploit the mistakes. They trust themselves. They make these sorts of passes. All of a sudden, the Bearcats do indeed leave a little bit of holes open. One of OSU's calling cards crosses into the middle. These are the types of opportunities that they create. 3 goals in that amount of time. Not what they were hoping for, not what they were hoping to have to need, but they believed in themselves and they had the strategy. They know themselves enough to know that they're always still in it. And again, even though it wasn't really the way they wanted to play and the Bearcats found a way to figure them out for a while, this is still OSU playing their method of soccer, and it plays perfectly into their strengths. Even when it's not working, it can start to work at any moment. That is why OSU is so dangerous. It's tough. It's really, really tragic for Cincinnati. They deserved a lot more. They deserve to be able to prove they can go on a deeper run and find their way into the NCAAs. They're not going to get to. Faced a tough team in the number 5 seed in the first round. Now we're going to see what happens from there. All right, then, 2 things to know. 1, we are not just looking at who wins this tournament and who comes close. Obviously, the NCAAs are down the road. We have to know what the committee thinks. A couple of different ways we can look at that. RPI is a big way. The other one is from a couple weeks ago on NCAA.com, the committee did rank their top 16. A lot will change, but that's something to keep in mind. Second thing to know, listen, our upsets are not done happening. Would be very surprised to see everything go chalk. Maybe our 10th seed doesn't find its way all the way. I don't expect Baylor to win this whole thing, but I would definitely expect more upsets in seeding. Those are your 2 things to know. 1, watch for upsets. 2, got to keep an eye on those rankings. There's a couple teams who really need another win or 2 if they're going to find their way into that field in the end of things. All right, playoff send-off. What's next? Listen, Saturday, early in the morning, we got to get our alarms ready because 9 a.m. Central, 8 Mountain Time. It's Oklahoma State kicking things off. They're taking on BYU. Cowgirls and Cougars, 5 versus 4. That's the early game. Then you got Colorado playing the number 1 seed, TCU. They locked it up on the last day. Tough day away in Stillwater. They made it happen. Colorado trying to prove that early season dominance was not a fluke. Of course, now they're the number 9 seed. They've got a lot to prove. Got to beat TCU if they want to make sure they've got a spot in the national tournament later on. Baylor is going to get Texas Tech. That's the 10 versus 2. That's coming up at 2:30. And then you have Kansas and West Virginia, the 6 versus 3. That one went chalk. It's a 6:15 kickoff, and all those matches are on ESPN Plus. All of them, of course, as the whole tournament is, coming to you from Kansas City. And that is where we're going to have all of our eyes. That is your playoff send-off.